I don't know if anyone has ever noticed my plant here. It's kind of ugly, but I love it. Um, it's called, I think it has a nickname of donkey ears. It was a gift and it's been here ever since. So it's kind of fun. Hey, Jeff, I see you on there. Welcome. Let me know if you want to give any insight. Morning, Liz. Jeff, how
Good
are you?
morning. Yes, sir. Just fine. Happy to join you today. I'm interested in, I'm not sat in on one of your sessions, so I'm interested to be here.
Oh, cool. Very neat. Well, I'm honored. Thanks for joining. How's your office doing?
I think the market is remarkably better.
Yeah. Well, I think
Combination of things.
it's kind of like I have the tides on my watch so that I know if the tide's coming in or going out. And I feel like the tide's coming in, Jeff. The tide's coming
Yeah,
in.
we have a tendency to lead, especially our state, in terms of market conditions, and we led into a buyer's market and then a rather severe buyer's market. We led the state because I remember when we were experiencing buyer's markets, Tampa area was still a seller's market. So we kind of transitioned in and out as we actually did back in '07 and '08. We seemed to get in there earlier and get out earlier. And so I think we're coming out of a fairly um, rigorous buyer's market due to a lot of reasons.
Yeah, there are a
And
lot of reasons. There's a lot, we still have a lot of obstacles, but I agree. I'm cautiously optimistic and realistically I'm really just looking for a marginal improvement. I don't know if we should expect for a totally different market than we've had the last 2 years, but if we can have a marginally better one.
yeah, the question is going to be so many listings got pulled off the market over the
Yeah.
summer.
Yeah.
And, we know that we went from looking at our numbers yesterday at the brokers meeting, we went from like 13 months of inventory in January to 7.4 months in September. So that's almost a 50% reduction. Now we know already in October listings are coming back up. And I know from working with our own agents that a lot of people are going back on the market. And I think that you know, we're calling that a shadow inventory, but I think that um, those that come back on the market that are priced to sell will be fine. Those that are coming back on the market with their pricing that hadn't given them anything for a couple of years or more are just going to sit again. It's going to look like our inventory is growing and our month supply is growing when we'll see what portion of that inventory actually, is sellable when it comes back on. Oh,
Yeah,
there's Mr. Pending is on. Good morning,
he's
Mr. Pending.
pending. That's how I always view him, blurry. That's the Mike I know and love.
He's not.
Um,
He's got everything clear in his mind, though. That's for sure.
yeah, sure. So I do want to share with people when we look at our closings within my company, we had about a 40% increase this October over the same month last year. So October versus October, 40% higher this year, which is wonderful. And the best way I can explain it is that the market is rewarding the aggressive buyers and sellers. It's not everyone's going to get to play in this market, but it is going to reward people that are aggressive and price it to sell and do the right things to market the property. So, Mike, what do you think? I have Jeff on here. He was talking, he said that you're just the best.
Well, Jeff and I are on the same bowling team, so he better say these things.
No, we rely on each other.
I apologize for getting here late. I was just wrapping up a sales meeting, so I
No,
rolled out of
no.
that one into
Okay.
this one.
So I got to and hear from Jeff a little bit. Jeff is the managing broker at the Keller Williams office here in Naples. Jeff, you've got an incredible reputation, wonderful agents. So I thank you. And if anyone wants to pick your brain, I'm just going to send them your way. Okay.
All right, that's fine. You help a lot of our agents out. They rely on you, so we appreciate your doing that.
Yeah.
So there you
Well, and
go.
Jeff, I'll if you want to join at some point today, if you want to put yourself on video, you're welcome, or I'll have you on in another video. Okay.
Okay, however you want to do it's fine.
Well, hey, if you want to join on video, come on on. How do I do? Let's see.
How do I do that?
Let's see. We'll see. Jeff is going to come
Join
on.
as a panel.
All right, here he comes.
See if I can get a face for you.
I want to see if he comes on video if he's still wearing a tie.
Yeah, are you decent?
Ah,
No tie today. I'm
there you
dressing
go.
for the committee showcases is a cowboy format. So
Now
I
you,
actually have to wear a cowboy hat in the professional standards booth. So here's the start right here. I got my
love it.
jeans in the
I love
car
it.
and try to make it through the committee showcase.
So,
you notice
Jeff,
all three speakers are wearing a plaid shirt. Yeah, I'm a trendsetter.
there's a lot of checkers there. So I wanted to use this today's topic as kind of a hodgepodge or a potluck to get people's questions answered. We've gone now, we've had 18 months of kind of like a crazy environment, with the NER changes, with contract changes, and everything in between. So I thought
Sorry.
there's a lot of questions. There's a lot of unknown stuff, but I wanted to pick some of the stuff that I've seen over the last 12 months and try and hit it. And if I've got these two gentlemen with me, I think we'll do a great job with it. So we're gonna take it one step at a time, see where the questions go. If anyone wants a specific question answered that's watching today, please just put it in the chat. I'd be happy to address it. And so here's one of my favorite questions right off the bat. How do you sell personal property as part of the sale? So, the word we always see is the word turnkey. And that word drives me crazy. Jeff, what do you think of the word turnkey? What do you think?
When I teach the contracts a lot because I want people to have good relationships with their customers and have win-win situations. I use the analogy whenever I'm teaching the contract class that in tennis, love means nothing. In real estate, turnkey, as furnished, as seen, as shown, partially furnished, all of those things really mean nothing, and they can't be relied upon to be without some kind of an inventory that's signed off by both parties. You really don't have anything that the contractual that will guarantee when your buyer walks in for the walkthrough that the items that they're planning that are going to be there are going to be there because both parties have signed off on a list. And I know it's tedious, and I know some great listing agents, like Mike's agents, they always put the inventory up with the MLS listing, and then all the buyer has to do is bring it down and sign it. But I tell buyers agents that don't have an inventory to go take an inventory because that's the only way to truly protect yourself is to have something signed off by both parties to prove what's going to be there and what's going to convey at closing.
That's a
Those are my thoughts.
That's a textbook answer. We've just seen too many times where being vague about the personal property bites us in the butt. It is something that we know is coming, and people just seem to keep making that same mistake. So I've pulled up a tool that I really love. It is the MLS glossary, and you can get this from your association. This is the one that Nabor provides. And it goes to this part, the field indicated if furniture is included in the list price. This is my Merriam dictionary because really this is what people are referring to when they say turnkey in an MLS listing. And so it says the list price includes furniture and household items. Mike, does that include the TV?
Does that include the what?
The TV.
Which term are we looking at now? Turnkey?
Turnkey. Yeah, turnkey. Does that include the TV? What about, does that include the refrigerator in the garage?
I would say yes. I'm probably wrong, but I've always looked at turnkey as what you see is what you get.
Well,
I'll
and
defer to the
I think
attorney on that one.
that's the key here is that this is too vague. If everything goes perfectly and the buyer and seller are amazing, maybe this works. But it really doesn't answer the question as to what's included and what is not. Some people believe that it just means move in ready. Well, you don't need a TV to move into the property. You don't need a toaster to move into the property. But if those things were important to you, you should probably put it in your contract. So I have language that I love to provide it where I realize maybe you don't want to do an inventory, even though that's the best, that's the gold standard. What I love to do is, in the very least, I'll lay out the things that are important to the customers. So I'll say all personal property, including but not limited to, and then I start listing it out. Furniture, decorations, TVs, linens, kitchen accessories. And then I'll put an exclusion list. So I would say that's kind of your minimum standard is that you'll specify all the things that you want to make sure are in there, and then you'll provide an exclusion list, or you just won't have it at the property at all. They won't be in the pictures, they won't be at the showing, they're not going to be at the inspection period. So that's kind of my thinking on turnkey. But that glossary is really, really great. In fact, I used it yesterday for a different context. Jeff, I have a question for you. So, and I don't know if you know this answer. So this is a little bit out of my wheelhouse typically. The property is concrete construction on the first floor and wood frame on the second floor. How do you input that onto MLS? Because I don't think there's an option to put like specifically that. I don't think you can say concrete block with wood frame upstairs. I think it's just concrete block, wood frame, and then poured concrete. Do you know that answer, Jeff?
Well, yeah, I'm just involved in a proceeding on that. The issue is there's quite a bit of concrete block construction and wood frame second floor in our market, and
There is. My house is built that way.
the weight of the second floor concrete requires a lot of different engineering. And if you're going to have a poured concrete second floor and and concrete block, you're talking about a substantial increase in the cost of the home, the engineering, and all that. So I would say most second floor structures in our market are pressure treated wood and using a wood decking. But it's not. I think that the basic MLS is you put it in as concrete block.
Yeah,
I don't know that there's a space in the MLS to say, hey, the second floor is,
right.
poured concrete. You could certainly put it in the confidential remarks because it would make the home, I guess, substantially stronger, but also substantially more expensive. So if you were wanting to differentiate yourself from another home in that market, you could say, hey, this home is, completely poured concrete block and poured concrete
To distinguish against
floors. Yeah.
something that may not
But
be. Yeah, love
I've
that.
always thought the term concrete block in the MLS had to do with the foundation
The
and first
foundation. Yeah,
floor.
so this is the only thing the glossary says. So this says the field mainly describes the construction of the structure, and it has concrete block, elevated, handicap, manufactured, metal frame, modular, wood frame. My only question to the audience or anyone that might know the answer is I wonder if you can select multiple. Maybe that would be your solution. But ultimately, I've seen a lot of listings where they just put one. It might be a question, and this leads to the third point that I want to point to is sometimes the attorney is not the right person to ask this question. you can actually call Neighbor. You can call Marco Island. You can call Bonita, and they will actually answer this question. They have someone on staff that knows how you're supposed to input this. They know how to answer questions about marketing. In fact, we had a question the other day about, hey, what does it mean to be publicly marketing the property? Can I, obviously I can't do a mass mailing to other brokers if I'm not publicly marketing, but can I reach out to one person specifically? And can I do that? And I said, I think you can, but call MLS. And they did, and they got a great answer. So definitely do it that way. Brett Brown, Jeff, you know Brett. He's saying
Absolutely. Good morning, Brett.
select both. And that probably makes sense to select both because it is concrete construction and it is wood frame as well. So that probably makes the most sense. Although I'm sure there are a lot of listings where they're not doing it that way. I think it does have an impact on insurance, on what the buyer is looking for. And so if you just select both, you're probably safer to select both. I love that.
That'd
All
be an
right.
interesting question. We subscribe to what the national standards for what MLS terms to use and what they mean. That'd be an interesting question to ask our director of MLS.
Yeah, we're gonna have to put
So
that on the list, Jeff.
yeah, I think that's a good question. I know there's a standard by which we've agreed to conform for what's a bedroom and what's a den and those kinds of things. I wonder what the standards say about that and
Yeah.
what the right answer is. That's a good question.
Yeah. See, look how much you're learning today, Jeff. Isn't this great?
I'm thrilled.
Okay, so someone else. And no, this is really interesting. So Mike and I have talked about the benefits of an as-is contract versus a standard contract. And so someone asked, why would I recommend using an as-is contract? Can you explain why to use that over the regular? Also, I don't understand the difference between calculating versus non-calculating contracts. Jeff, do you have a preference
Well,
on as-is or standard?
the calculating is easy. It just has to do with what your forms vendor supplies in terms of when you take from .loop or
Right.
DocuSign or Form Simplicity or whatever forms program you're using. Some of them
It's the
have
same
calculating.
contract. It's just how the vendor sets up the fields.
The vendor sets it up when they program the field so
Yeah.
that as you put in the offer price and all of that, it calculates the amount due at closing. So that's a simple one. The as is versus regular.
Yeah, do you
Um,
have a preference?
I'm not a fan of as is contracts and never have been. There are no as is contracts anymore. That's all as is except. And when you
Sounds
go
like
in
two. Yeah.
to ask the seller for repairs or credits in the as-is contract, unless you get a real estate attorney to write the amendment and have, require the use of licensed contractors and receipts, many of these as-is contracts come across. I've actually seen them supply the buyer request and seller response document with an as-is contract, which is absolutely unenforceable. But the point is that I honestly think that you can protect both buyer and seller adequately with a regular contract. And if you want a due diligence period, then use the right to inspect, right to terminate clause. I just don't, I think the attraction is to be able to walk away for any reason and no reason. And there's no magic pill there for a seller who says, well, I'm happy with as is because I don't have to make any repairs or give any credits. What about if the buyer comes back to them with a request to repair a defective item, like the air conditioning is not cooling properly, or there's a leak, or there's an appliance that's not working? If those items are significant, then and the seller says, I don't care, I'm not going to fix them. I believe that the seller and the agent would have to disclose that to a new buyer. So I don't know that as is a great vehicle, but I know a lot of people don't agree with me at all.
Well, this is where you and I, Jeff, we're going to have a problem. We may have to put our lunch date on ice for just a minute.
Okay.
I adore the as-is contract. I adore it. And there's one main reason, simplicity. It goes with my personality. I'm a simple guy. I want things to be simple. I don't want to fight. I just want to make sure if you want the property, I can sell it to you. If you don't, please exit stage left, right? So my whole point is if you're focused on simplicity, the as-is contract is way simpler compared to the standard contract, for a couple of reasons. It's 2 pages shorter. I love that. It's 11 pages instead of 13.
Yeah.
In addition, the inspection clauses are a lot simpler. So you've got, Jeff mentioned that the as-is really isn't an as-is because it's subject to an inspection period. Yes, and it's a very simple inspection period. Buyer can terminate for any reason during that inspection period. And I think that's really simple. It's like one paragraph as opposed to 2 pages of inspection clauses. So Jeff, if you've got a brand new agent or you're trying to explain this to someone, you'd rather explain one paragraph than 2 pages. So to me, simplicity really rules the day in that regard as well. And then from a seller's perspective, because the seller has to understand this language as well. They have to understand what their obligations might be or what the buyer might be allowed to do. But you can also get rid of the buyer election seller response time period. That's 15 days that we now don't have to worry about. Simple. That's really great. So on a standard contract, you have a 10-day inspection period, but then you add on a 5-day buyer election, you add on a 10-day seller response, and then possibly even a 5-day buyer response after that. So simple. We can restrict the number of days. And then finally, the last piece on all condos, it's as is anyways. It's a 7 business day inspection period because of the condo review period. And so if you're giving someone the window to terminate for any reason for 7 business days as it is, we might as well line it up and just have an as-is contract, really lean into the simplicity and go with it. But I don't blame you, Jeff. I think most people in this town are still using the standard contract. I've just tried to go against the current a little bit on that, and it's all in the vein of simplicity. But definitely has its downsides.
I'd be interested in doing a point counterpoint with you someday, but
Oh,
I
good.
noticed that all attorneys love as-is contracts. That's one thing I've
Yeah.
noticed in my travels, and many of us brokers are like, come to a contract class and learn what it is that the as-is contract doesn't cover, and one of them is permits. If you don't put some exclusionary language in your as-is contract, the buyer is subject to inherit all kinds of permits, liens, and other
Yeah.
violations because they don't get
Unless they
discovered in the
object.
due diligence period.
Yeah.
So
So that's a thing, and that's probably the next thing we need to talk about. Mike, are permits a title issue or an inspection issue?
Wow.
Just make a guess. It's 50-50, Mike.
All
Are they
right.
a title issue or can I?
Title issue. I knew I'd get that wrong.
it's okay because there's an awful lot of people that think that you can't close with an open or expired permit or an outstanding municipal lien or a code violation, and you absolutely can. That's my fear of as-is contracts. We have language that was crafted by one of our attorneys, and we require it to be in every as-is contract that says that the property must be conveyed without any open expired permits, municipal liens, or code violations prior to closing. And that language goes into it's legally sufficient language that I got from an attorney that protects the buyer from inheriting those issues, because normally the bargaining, the due diligence periods in these as-is contracts are bargained down to 10 days or 7 days, and that's not enough time to do the municipal lien search. So I think that it's just a matter of, obviously, FARBAR is considering one contract. So I think that we could sit down as a group and come up with a way to use one contract, because there are some big advantages to both sides. And I tend to agree with you that the timing of all of this, 15.5, 10.5 in the inspection period could be modernized or optimized, I guess, to make the contracts more comparable. And I think, like I said, I know that the Fire Bar Committee is considering going to one contract as a result of all this stuff. So it'll be interesting to see how that works out. But there are very definite pros and cons to each side, each one. And like I say, I think if you and I sat down, Christian, and a point counterpoint, we'd each have our points. And then I think it's up to you to talk to your broker out there in the video land there and decide, what's the best for you.
Yeah, actually, Christian, the more I think about it, that title answer I gave you, that made no sense. So I like to retract that answer.
So, yeah, you're no problem, Mike. I think a lot of people think that though, because I've certainly had a lot of people call and say, well, I can't, there's an open permit, so I can't close. And that unfortunately is not the case.
It is surprising how many open permit situations you see these days. I mean, it's I actually had one on my house, and then my daughter discovered it. It was a small one that I was not aware of. Certainly, we cleared it up very quickly, but
Many of them are really easy to clear up. But if you don't know them, and I would say, people think the sellers are, trying to hide something. Well, I remodeled my kitchen. I didn't know that there was an open permit or an expired permit.
Hey, Jeff, can I give you one piece of advice?
Sure.
Use that language in all your contracts.
You don't think that
put it in everything. So
it's covered pretty much in the regular contract, but it's
not. So here's the reason.
Well, that's interesting.
The seller can say no, right? So in a standard NABOR contract, the seller can say no. So, however, if you put it in the beginning of the contract, seller shall close any open permits, yada, yada, well, everything you just had, then the seller's agreeing to it up front. You don't have to put it on your buyer election. So I would put it in all of your contracts. And that's the advice I've given to people before.
Yeah, I think maybe that could be. Now, it wouldn't hurt. I mean, because there is a carve out in the NABOR standard contract for the permit discovery after you've presented the buyer's request and seller's response. But I'm not sure how well understood that is. I think you're right.
Yeah. So it's tricky. And here's what I'm going to tell people on how this works behind the scenes. So we get in a new contract. Let's say you send it to me, on day 2. We're going to do a permit search. In Collier County, City of Naples, we can get that permit search in like 2 days, 1 or 2 days. It's really simple. In Lee County, it tends to be a little bit longer. And then in other counties, it potentially could be longer. So, once we do get it, we're going to let the buyer and the buyer's agent know. We're going to disclose it to the listing agent and say, hey, we're asking for this to be resolved. But the real answer, the real thing that the NABOR contract requires is that the buyer make an election and the seller agree to do it. And sometimes there's a miscommunication and it falls through the cracks. So my office or whatever title company you're working with, they'll do that permit search, they'll let people know, but we're not really making the election for our customer. Some attorneys think they are, but they're not really doing it because the seller may or may not respond yes. So putting it on the contract to begin with, it wouldn't hurt. You got great language, Jeff. I've provided that to people that watch this before as well. I think it's a good idea. Can't hurt. I
like the idea of putting it in all contracts. The issue we have is our forms vendors, won't allow us to permanently put in to a form anything that doesn't come from the source, which is NABOR. So I would love to be able to put some of those sentences in all of our contracts, so an agent doesn't have to remember to do it. But I tend to agree with you. That is a good idea. There's no harm in putting it into all contracts.
So here I'm putting into the chat. It's a little long-winded. It's what I had in front of me, But basically, seller agrees to close, resolve, and obtain final inspections and approvals for all open, expired, or otherwise outstanding building permits affecting the property at seller's sole expense prior to closing. I put some more in there, so if you guys want to take a look at that, or if you want to email me, I'd be happy to share it with you. I put a little bit extra stuff to say if it wasn't closed by closing, what happens, but you really don't need to put that in there. You really are just very simplistically saying seller shall close any open or expired building permits prior to closing. That's what you would use. And I
And I
would,
think you might want to refer to a municipal lien or a code violation because those also convey with the property, don't they?
yeah, sometimes you're right. It depends on the type of lien, so you could put that in there as well. That's pretty smart. I love that. All right, so Brett says, I just received a call about an NAR disclosure regarding wire fraud. I suggested they go to nar.realtor, search consumer guides, and then search wire fraud. Mike and Jeff, are you aware that any formal disclosure regarding wire fraud? Do you
We
require
have one,
formal
we have
disclosure?
one built into the neighbor listing contract um, and sales contract, and the sales contract has withstood several lawsuits. So I think the wire fraud disclosure that we have in our contract is pretty good. In the FAR, there's a separate disclosure document that we require for compliance. So I'm not sure how that interacts with it with the NAR one, but I know both FAR and NABOR address it. NABOR inside the body of listing and sales contract, and FAR with a separate advisory. So, Brett, I'm not sure how those two relate to each other.
Yeah, I'm not aware of any required disclosures. This is simply something to kind of stay out of harm's way. You know, we know that wire fraud is prevalent. We know that our buyers and sellers are major targets, and even more so, the realtors are major targets for this. And so we're trying to get ahead of it so that when something happens, we can say, hey, you signed the wire fraud disclosure. Hey, I put it in all my emails. Hey, I didn't send you wire instructions and we talked about it. So it basically takes the onus off of you because you did such a good job educating your customer. And to that point, my emails, the way I deal with wire fraud, kind of obnoxious. When you get an email from me in red at the top of the email, it says something to the effect of, you know, be careful of wire fraud. We do not send wiring instructions via email, and we do not change them during your closing. So, I realized that so many people were ignoring the footer that most attorneys have. They're just not reading it. So I put it at the top, and it's obnoxious. It's like having a face tattoo. Mike, tell us about the time you got a face tattoo.
I've had a lot of different discussions on wire fraud, and what Brett brought up with the NAR consumer guide, I recommend the agents hand it out because it's all about public awareness. It's
Yeah.
making the consumer aware that wire fraud, they're looking at everyone tied to the transaction if it's a hacker, and they're looking for the weakest link. And so the agent might do everything right. It might be their buyer that has, a system with no safeguards, and the buyer's the problem, or it might be a title company that hasn't taken. I've seen that before, not with you, Christian, but I've seen that with some of your competitors that don't have the proper procedures in place. It could be anyone in the chain. So I'm constantly preaching about wire fraud because it's scary. When you look at the average price points in this area, if there's a hit, and I will say this, it's not isolated. This wire fraud problem is a big problem in Southwest Florida. And it's not going away because they are having some success with it.
Yeah.
So,
Mike, I think if you've ever been involved in a wire fraud situation, it will remain in your memory forever. It's a lot of money and it's huge trauma. And most of the time, maybe somebody gets an email that looks just like Christian's. That's a fraudster. So I think it really is. There's a huge amount of money involved. And I was personally involved in one that shut down an entire title company. So I just, it's a sick feeling in your stomach when you get involved in one of these cases.
Yeah, there's a exotic car rental company, and the founder of it said one day, I have to give you my $500,000 Ferrari to make $4,000 on a rental. That's just bad math. If you wrap the car around a tree, if you do this, you do that, I'm taking a huge risk just to make, the $4,000. Title companies and law firms are taking a bigger risk than that with wire fraud. So to make the math really simple, on $1 million deal, the title insurance is $5,000. Now I don't get to keep the full 5,000, but I have to hold on to $1 million in liability. If I send it to the wrong place, if the buyer sends the money the wrong place, if confidential information is compromised. So I'm taking $1 million risk to make less than $5,000 on title. It's tough. It's a really, really brutal business. So we kind of, we just have to be very careful, and because it puts all of our jobs at jeopardy if it's not done correctly. So it's really troubling.
I,
Terry,
I,
Terry has a
I
good
will
point.
add one thing. We
Yeah,
had the FBI people that called business email compromise. We've had them down to the board a couple times,
yeah.
and they are vicious about finding money that was defrauded. And their basic claim is if you can get a hold of them in 24 hours or less, they can recoup a large percentage of these monies because they don't go directly to Africa or overseas with the money. They go to what they call a mule account, which is somebody that just has it. It says work from home, and they first thing they ask you to do is get on and set up a savings account. So they put these funds in these mule accounts for a few days to avoid them going right out on the international wire. And these FBI people, we should probably have them down again. They're rabid about how you can stop a wire fraud once it's started because it's so easy. They're so sophisticated in their emails that it's so easy for somebody to fall into the trap. But there is a way, the minute you're involved with one, to call the FBI. It's out of Tampa, but they are unbelievable in how they can get money back.
All right, so I'm gonna be devil's advocate. You ready for this, Jeff?
Okay.
It's a disaster. The FBI and Secret Service, they can't keep up with it. They literally can't keep up with it. We had an issue, and luckily we got all the money back, but when we reached out to the FBI, the call did not get returned. We reached out to
Really?
Secret Service, they never even picked up the
I
phone.
think we have a special number that we got from them.
That's
I'm
what
just
they
saying
tell you.
I've used it a couple times. So
Yeah, so here's the special number. So wires are still the way to go. Despite all the fraud, despite all the issues, everything is wires. It has to be, because that is the best way to get money from A to B and have it be good funds. That is required per the contract. So really, it's how do you share wiring instructions? How do you communicate with your customers? That's the key. And what steps do you have in place when something doesn't go correctly or to avoid it from going incorrectly? So I work with a company called Certified. There are a lot of companies that are now kind of catching on and they're using them as well. It's an encrypted portal. It's an insured portal. So
oh,
even if
nice.
this company fails, even if they lose your money, it's insured by Lloyd's of London. And that is the only comfort that I have at night because I know at some point there will be a problem and I just want to make sure we can still close. I want to make sure we can pick up and just go for it. So this company's certified. They actually get the Secret Service to answer the phone. So we had a deal where someone lost some money, and within 20 minutes, the director of the Secret Service was on the phone with me, finding it, freezing it, and getting it back. It was outrageous. It was so great. So certified has been incredible for that reason, but there are a million steps that we take to try and avoid it. Realtors don't need to be involved. The one thing, my one advice is work with title company or law firm that spends money on security. So I don't want to see people using AOL accounts and Gmail accounts. I don't even want realtors using those. I want you to use business accounts with security features in place. I want to see that you have an IT person, that you have a relationship with your bank, and use companies like Certified or Closing Lock or any number of these companies, but they are operating the way you would expect a multi-million-dollar company to operate. There's just no other way to do it.
So that certified cost you, I'm assuming you
Oh, I pay
absorb the
big
cost
money
for
for
that.
Certified. Yeah.
So,
So,
but that cuts into the small amount of money you're making for doing the
uh,
title work in the first
well,
place, right?
you don't have to cry for me, Jeff. We've got a wonderful business. It's investing in the
Okay.
business. You know, it's investing in the security of the agents that trust us with their money, with their closings. I think there's really no excuse for someone not to do it. It'd be like
Sounds
that
great.
same analogy of renting that exotic car and it not being insured. That's just crazy. All right, so Terry had a question. In an HOA sale, single family home, I've had experience that the HOA and board of directors won't approve the sale if there's an outstanding violation within the HOA. And I have seen that as well, Terry. It's problematic. I've also seen where they'll disclose that there's a violation, yet there may not be an approval process. They don't have to approve the buyer. And so what we do is we put the pressure on the seller. The seller has to close this violation. If they refuse or whatever reason, the buyer has a decision to make. Do we move forward and deal with it after closing? Take title subject to this violation, or do we do something else about it? Do we have to cancel or fight? So having language like what Jeff has could be helpful in that regard. But if you're not going to get approved for it, then you'd be able to terminate per your sales contract.
Yeah,
So
I think
that's
we've
why.
added quite a bit of language into the sales contract to
Yeah.
protect the buyer when there are outstanding violations that the seller hasn't yet redeemed. And so long as the buyer applies timely for approval by the association within 10 days, if the seller still hasn't or won't close those violations, the buyer has an absolute right to
Terminate.
vacate the transaction,
Yeah.
get their money back. So that was added due to some experiences that the individual just asked the question. That's what that's there, is to protect the buyer. Now, it's not a great outcome because the buyer wants the house.
Yeah.
So, I mean, but it is protection. Some of these situations and sellers can be, many dollars and lack of proper maintenance and so it's there to protect the buyer, but like
Yeah.
you almost hate to see it because
It provides
it's
leverage.
canceling a transaction.
Yeah, it provides leverage. So I'm hopeful that, something like that should get the seller to stand up and make it right. If it's a penalty or a fee, we pay it. If it's maintenance, maybe there's a credit that's given to the buyer, they deal with it after closing. Um, Ruth asks, I'm interested in your thoughts with agents that won't let buyers sign the condo receipt after receiving all the documents. So this was actually one of the topics that was in the email that I really wanted to address. So thank you for asking this, Ruth. So Jeff knows this, Mike knows this. The Florida statute on condo docs is that you receive it. Your time period starts upon receiving all of the documents, right? That's your time period starting. So, and the way the NABOR contract is written, it would be the sooner of your execution date or effective date or receiving all the documents. And that would be day zero, that when you have everything, day zero. And then you're counting 7 business days from there. The receipt part of that is really just an accommodation, right, Jeff? Wouldn't you say that was really to help agents understand, all right, did we give you everything? And
Well, unfortunately, you and I both sit on the Legal Resources Committee that updates the NABOR contract based on questions like that. And unfortunately, the conclusion that we get is that the statute doesn't have any requirement for a receipt, and therefore it's a courtesy that the buyer signs it and sends it back to the listing agent and ultimately to the seller. So it's a little frustrating for those of us in the field that say, hey, if you don't send that back, how do we know you received the documents and how do you know when your 7 days started? So it's a great question. I wish there was something in the statute that would allow us to have some leverage in that respect.
Yeah, so I had seen some questions at some of the neighbor classes that were taught, and they said that, I send everything on a Monday, and then I don't get the receipt back until the next week. And when I do, the date is wrong. It might be five,
Right.
6 days after
Yeah.
I actually gave you everything. It says, what do I do in that scenario? And actually, the answer is very simple. You're going to send an email back and say, thank you for providing, just note that the day your buyer received everything was actually on Monday. That's when your days start on the condo review period. So you're just letting them know. You can fight them, you can ask them to change it, you can cross dates out and waste a couple of days figuring that out. But you need to know that the day started when everything was sent. That's what it is. The real trick is if the buyer's agent didn't share the documents. That's the really gray area that we're trying to avoid with that receipt.
Yeah, I think the two contracts, when we ask the attorneys about in Florida Realtors about the FAR bar, they indicate that delivery to the agent is delivery. And in the neighbor contract, it specifically says delivery to the agent is not delivery to the buyer. So
It has to be
it's kind
delivered
of
to the
a gray
buyer.
area between the two contracts.
Yeah, so here's my other piece of advice on that. If an agent is playing games, let's say you send them everything on Monday, but they call it an early day and they never send it. And then they send it Tuesday or Wednesday. Maybe they're on vacation. That is ripe for a complaint, an ethics complaint, I would think. I don't know. Has Nabor ever mediated an ethics complaint regarding the delivery of documents?
To my knowledge, there is no receipt or requirement for the receipt. So unless you're
Yeah.
looking at maybe some stamps on some emails or whatever, but you still in the neighbor world, you can't say that delivery to the agent at 5 o'clock today
Right.
is delivery to the as you say, the agent can be out of town or just can't connect with the buyer, and you don't really know where um, when it was delivered to the buyer.
Yeah, I would say maybe the solution is to have the condo doc receipt as part of the signed contract. So when you send
Yeah.
back the offer that the buyer gave, so buyer makes an offer, seller signs and returns it, they should include the condo doc receipt as part of that so that they know, yep, you got everything. That's the one time you have some leverage in that regard.
And it's professionalism. I mean, do the
Yeah,
right thing.
yeah, that's clean. It looks great. Um, Hey Mike, do your agents like getting paid? Do they prefer having compensation on deals?
I think all agents like getting paid.
Yeah, of course. So compensation's got to be our next topic, right? So a lot has changed in the compensation world. Just calling it compensation seems very different from 18 months ago. But the NAR settlement drove this change. And ultimately, the simple answer is that you need a buyer broker agreement whenever you are working with a buyer. And the definition of working with a buyer, it's got some exceptions and workarounds, but essentially once you start showing them property, once you start negotiating contracts for them, you should have that buyer broker agreement signed up early and often. Um, Jeff, what is your take on the buyer broker agreements and what you're teaching your agents and just overall your perspective?
Well, we weren't particularly pleased with what the changes were made to the neighbor buyer broker agreements during the preparation for the NAR settlement. There's a few things in there that we as a company didn't like, so we developed our own one-page agreement, and it's non-exclusive because exclusivity involves chasing a buyer, and we just decided that that wasn't in our best interest. Exclusivity is based on the relationship that the agent keeps with the buyer and make sure that they're, taking care of them and that they know, like, and trust them. But many of these agreements, including the Farbar ones, have 3 or 4 different levels of exclusivity. I think a simple one-page agreement is where we decided to go because, as I say, the business of trying to enforce a buyer going and working with another agent involves taking action against, a consumer, and we opted out of that.
Yeah.
And so we don't for the most part, we don't use exclusive buyer broker relationships. People really want them. The FAR contract is a little bit more forgiving. But I think the onus is on the agent to keep their relationship with the buyer intact and
Yeah.
make sure that they have a good working relationship. And, you can only put so much in an agreement, and you can only decide what you're going to do if that agreement isn't kept. I hope that answers your question.
No, it's wonderful. Mike, do you have an opinion on buyer broker agreements and issues people have been seeing with that?
Kind of hard to not have an opinion on it. Yeah, I agree with Jeff. The simpler, the better. I had one over the last 3 days where we've gone back and forth with the buyer countless times, and to me, it's all about trust. And if they beat you up over a 3 day period over the buyer broker agreement and the wording and what should be in it, which then you start wondering, is there trust there? But it's I'm torn on it because I understand the lawyers out there that want to throw everything but the kitchen sink into that agreement. And that what they're trying to do is protect against all the what ifs. But on the other hand, the more of that you throw into the document, the more confused the consumer gets. And then you wonder about the agent's ability to explain that agreement. So it really, but I do like the simple is good. But you still need the key points in there.
Yeah, so a couple of things. Whenever what we have found is that signing the agreement for most customers hasn't been a major issue. You just need something signed saying that you're allowed to work with them and that you charge compensation. And what form you use, it's going to be based on your broker and what they're advising you to do. But you do need something. And if you do have a buyer that's nervous about it, or they want some comfort, the big thing that we've found is that we lean into that addendum to sales contract compensation, or FARBAR has a very similar compensation rider as well. And basically, your offer would be contingent on the seller agreeing to pay your agent compensation. I just really like that, especially for customers that are nervous, because you can say, look, I charge X, and but anytime we make an offer, we're going to include this contingency. And if the seller refuses, you'll have the ability to cancel. This is part of your offer. So it really empowers the buyer to make offers, to work with customers, to be honest with their agent without really putting much at risk. This is what you charge, and my offer is contingent on your fee being paid by the seller. I love that if we take that one step further, we're really starting to see progress on, I don't know if it's progress, but an evolution on listing agreements. So because of all these buyer broker agreements that are getting signed and the way that offers are being asked, fewer people are asking the question, how much is the seller offering? Not everyone. I mean, that's still a big part of this, but more people, more listing agents aren't actually including a set compensation for buyer brokers. They're leaving that part blank. And Jeff, I think there are even other entire brokerages that's their model, to not pay compensation to co-broke. So they want you to just put it in your offer. And so I think it's really all about the delivery of that information, because you have to have a good answer for when an agent says, how much is your seller offering? Jeff, have you seen that?
Yeah, I think that you have to pretty much, you can't say, well, make me an offer and we're going to, if the seller specifically in the listing agreement says, well, we're not going to offer compensation to the buyer's broker, but we would be willing to negotiate it. That's one thing. But one of the problems we see is if your listing contract says, hey, I'm going to pay the listing broker X, and out of that, the listing broker is going to pay the buyer's broker Y. I think you have to disclose that. I don't think you can just say, well, make me an offer and we'll take a look at it. But there are, you're right, there are brokerages that require that the buyer's broker negotiate their own compensation, which makes it a little sticky with your buyer because you're saying, hey, I know you love this house and you want to make an offer, but if the seller says no compensation to me at all, then are you willing, you have to say to them, are you willing to pay, all or part of my compensation? And in our buyer broker agreement specifically allows the buyer to say, don't show me any properties where I might have to pay. So it's a sticky wicket when, I think it all has to go back to the listing agreement. You have an obligation, I think, to disclose what's in your listing agreement. And if your listing agreement says the seller's not offering anything to the buyer broker, then I think that has to be communicated back to the buyer almost before you show the property. I think it's,
Yeah, so
you can't
I think
show a buyer something when they don't have certainty as to what the outcome's going to be.
Yeah, I did see, Jeff, there are some listing agents and they deliver it really well. In my opinion, I think they deliver it very well. They'll say, whatever it is you need for compensation included in your offer, and my seller will consider it.
Yeah.
So that it's a really nice way. Whatever it is you need, whatever it is you're charging for compensation, included in your offer, and my seller will include it.
We'll take a look at it. That's fair. Listen, I'm sorry. I'm on a hard
No,
out
this is
here
perfect. That we were
10
kind of running over
or
time.
11, excuse me. So I appreciate the opportunity to participate with one of the leading pending advocates in the real estate world. And thank you, Mike, for letting me chime in. I hope I didn't chime in too much.
Always good to see you, Jeff.
Yes, sir. Thank you all. Have a great day.
So thank you to Jeff for being on the video. He's still there a little bit. But Mike, any other last words of wisdom for everybody?
No, I got to tell you this. I think there's a lot of optimism among local real estate brokers. First off, the fall, we're having a better fall than last fall for a variety of reasons. I think there's really a sense of optimism right now.
Yeah.
That things are changing a bit. And I think we're all breathing a sigh of relief so far with hurricane season. Maybe that's part of why business is better. But you also have to recognize that last year with the two hurricanes off our shoreline, that held down the numbers from last year. So the numbers are going to be a lot better this year.
Yeah, I'm going to take a more cautious approach. I think it's too early to tell. We're coming out of 18 months, 24 months of kind of a really mediocre real estate market. We haven't dealt with a lot of the issues that still persist, but I'm more optimistic. I do believe that the tide is coming in. We're not gonna see the sandy banks as much, my hope over the next 5 years. If we're really going to be optimistic, this will give us 5 to 10 years of really strong improvement in our market. We withstood some pain the last couple of years, high interest rates, but now interest rates should start to come down, which will improve prices, will improve affordability, but we really have to be cautiously optimistic and not all the way optimistic. It's not going to be a crazy season, in my opinion. If it is, great. I would love to be wrong, but this market will reward aggressive sellers and aggressive buyers. But there's still a lot of very pensive buyers on the market. They're just not all the way in. And we have to find a way to get them in before the market really gets moving. Really.
I agree with you. I mean, honestly, I don't feel that we're seeing a giant surge per se, but people don't realize how bad last year's numbers were. I mean, really, just that, having a depressed market last year due to hurricane activity versus now, the numbers are going to seem a lot better than they really are, but I still sense some optimism out there.
Yeah, let's be optimistic together and realistic. But thank you, Mike, as always. Thanks to Jeff. If you want to reach out to Jeff, he's with Keller Williams. He's the managing broker, Jeff Jones, really involved at NABOR. And I'm glad that he was able to join us. That was a wonderful surprise. All right. Good luck, everybody. Call us if you need us.